Hello and welcome to a very special edition of That Shooting Show. My name is Steve Anderson. I am your humble host. We are on the internet with a shooting legend, none other than Brian Enos. Hello, Brian. How are you?
Hey, Steve, I'm doing good, thanks.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. I know I scared you when I said it would probably take 2 hours, so we probably ought to get right to it.
Okay, I'm ready.
All right. So for somebody who's never heard of Brian Enos, why don't you introduce yourself to our listeners?
I was did shot IPSC shooting started right about probably 1980 locally, and shot my first tournament when I left the state in '81, and then just kept after it over the years, just like a brief summary, and then started taking up the other stuff like the Steel Challenge and Bianchi Cup, and did pretty well on those, and Sportsman's Team Challenge, and just kept going after it pretty hard for 20 years, and then I just quit.
Well, and that's all we have time for. Thank you very much, Brian Enos. Now,
Yes.
you also did something that's called PPC, is that right?
Yeah,
Like Police
yeah,
Revolver?
I forgot about that. Yeah, I did PPC at the very beginning when I moved to Arizona in 1978. I got a job at the Arizona State Prison and got interested. I was always interested in guns since I can remember, and so I got my way worked into the Army there at the prison, and then started shooting PPC matches. When I shot my first PPC match, I knew that's what I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to just really go after it with everything I had. I worked at the prison for a couple of years, couldn't take it after that about 2 years, and quit. But by that time, I'd shot
I lost you there for a minute. By that time you'd
some
shot.
sort of competitive pistol shooting.
Okay, and
Yeah,
PPC goes up to like 50 yards, doesn't it?
it does. Yeah.
That sounds really challenging.
It's
Most,
extremely challenging. Yeah, it's boring in that the courses of fire is always the same, like bullseye or whatever. So when I quit PPC, my wife bought me a 45 for Christmas that year, and that's when I found the IPSC style. At that time, it wasn't probably really IPSC here, but it was that style of shooting, and that's when I found that. Then that's what I knew I was looking for.
and did IPSC seem really easy to you after shooting at 50 yards?
No, not at all. No, because the challenge is completely different. Probably my specialty was accuracy shooting throughout my life. That's what I was really good at, and shooting like really quickly with kind of a sense of abandon. That was more difficult for me to learn, actually.
Oh, I tell you what, my crowd's gonna love that. I joke about the over 50 crowd really having trouble finding speed because there was such a when I think of like an older version of understanding firearms, like we're not going to waste any ammunition, we're not going to do anything even remotely unsafe. Therefore, we're going to do this perfectly over and over and over again, the same way every time, which is fine until you want to do it faster. Did you struggle with that a little bit?
Yes, definitely. Yeah, that was hard. That was the hardest thing for me to learn, was to be able to shoot at a speed that I needed to shoot at to be competitive to win. But I caught on to it pretty quick. I'm a fast learner.
How do you think you finally got over that hump, or what was there a particular breakthrough that helped you understand that you could actually do that and not lose a lot of accuracy?
Nothing specific's coming to mind. It's like maybe I realized I could, I probably at that time was learning to, like, what we call track the sights better, and
Yes.
I just learned that by tracking the sights I could anticipate the shots as opposed to having to shoot called a stop shot for every shot.
Yeah, what I've always told people is when you fire a handgun, it goes up, down, shimmy, shimmy, settle. And it seems to me that if we can catch it on the way down and
Yeah,
skip all the shimmy, shimmy, settle, that's where a lot of people seem to have maybe the kind of breakthrough you're describing.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, you're just tracking the sights. You're seeing it as it's coming to back into the rear notch, and then so you can fire according to the movement that you're seeing.
That's outstanding. So, question number 2, what inspired you to write the book Practical Shooting Beyond Fundamentals?
Okay, that there was personally there was no inspiration. How it happened was a friend from the Southwest Pistol League was at my house for a tournament here. I don't remember when that was, probably mid '80s, and his name was Craig Gifford. We became really good friends, and I had I was just a crazy note taker. I wrote notes after every practice session, after every match. I just wrote down things that I could remember, things that worked, things that didn't work, things that I needed to work on. If a particular mindset or whatever was successful, I just wrote everything, and for ever since I began. So I had years worth of notes in these just handwritten notebooks, and they were just for me. I never intended to do anything with it. I just looked back through them and keep playing with ideas. And I showed all my notes to Craig, and I'd never shown him to anyone. And I think his exact words were, "This needs to be put into print, and you need to be paid for it." And it was just like, really? He said, "Yeah, this is like really good stuff." And then, coincidentally, shortly after that, the guy who originally published my book, whose name I'd rather not mention, he was looking for a guy. He was a ghostwriter for a golfing magazine, but his passion was shooting, but there was no money, and he didn't have any way to make any money writing about shooting, and so he contacted, I think it was Mike Plaxco back then, and asked him if he wanted to do a book with him, and he said no, and he passed that on to me, and somehow I got in contact with the guy, and he was interested. He knew who I was, and so I sent him all my material, and that's how it began. And then, so the way it worked is, it was a couple year process of these were just the randomest notes ever, and so he organized those. Being a professional writer, and he organized those, and then he would send them back to me as printed, and then he would send. They were all double spaced, and I would just scratch and copy and move and highlight, send it all back to him, back and forth like that for a couple of years, and finally I was happy with it.
Wow. So that means if people are struggling to understand practical shooting beyond fundamentals, it's actually somebody else's fault. Is that what you're telling me? And you must have you must have heard that a bunch by now, because that's a difficult book to consume. Have you heard that before?
Yeah, heard that before. That was my goal. Is I didn't want it to be another technique book or another ABC and throw it away book. I wanted it to, because at that time my shooting goal wasn't really different than just daily living goal. Like I didn't want to have a shooter mindset or a competitive mindset and a everything else mindset. And so that's kind of where that book came from, is I wanted it to be able to, I wanted people to be able to apply it to other than shooting. And, throughout the years I got at the range or whatever, I got some nice feedback on that. Guys told me it helped them one guy told him it helped him become a better welder. And just various things like that. And that's what I was hoping to hear. So I was happy about that.
My favorite part of that book, and I've probably read it a dozen times over the years. My favorite sentence in that book is, "Become interested in your shooting."
Okay. Interesting. Nice.
And what I love about that is they're always asking, how do I do this? How do I do that? Well, my thing is, if there's something that you really want to accomplish, if you go to the range with a timer and some targets and one goal, you're probably going to achieve that one goal just by becoming interested in what's actually happening, right?
Yes, that's very good, yep.
And so many people, I think, try to skip the part of self-observation and go straight to, I want to do the thing. And then because we have time and accuracy being measured, it's just a recipe for frustration.
Yes, definitely, yeah.
And I think that if they'll become interested in what they're actually doing and really observe more so than do, I know we're getting pretty close to Zen, which is one of your favorite things. If we can do more observing than we can active doing, I think we can learn a lot in a very short period of time.
Yes, I agree with all that. It's like you need to become interested in the process rather than get stuck on the goal.
Oh, okay.
So that's like the observe. You have to have patient observation. It will get you to the goal. But if you're worried too much about shooting as good as so-and-so, and you're not paying attention, like you said, being interested in where you're at and what you're doing and what you're seeing and observing, that's what's going to help you.
That's so good. Now, one thing that I didn't get directly from Practical Shooting Beyond Fundamentals, and maybe it wasn't supposed to be in there, or maybe I was looking for it the wrong way, there's not a whole lot in there, as I recall, about quote-unquote the mental game, as most people discuss it.
Okay.
Is that valid, or did I just miss it?
I haven't thumbed through the book in a long time, but like if I give the book or if I give the book to a friend or whatever that's not a shooter and they're just like they want to read it, I tell them to read chapters 1 and 3.
Okay.
In my standard answer. So that would be if they're the mental discipline would be layered in the words in those 2 chapters.
Okay. So my question is, did you struggle with any pressure or anxiety at the upper levels of competition?
You're always nervous. I don't know, like I don't know if the struggle would be the right word. You just learn to manage it.
Okay.
I knew when I shot my first tournament, I was so nervous it was ridiculous. But I loved it, and I think that's what I loved is the challenge of overcoming the pressure. Like for example, that you would feel like at a national championship,
Right.
and just shooting to your ability, shooting to your absolute capacity under that kind of pressure. There's something really rewarding about that.
So you almost enjoyed that pressure rather than tried to manage it or fight it or
Yeah, no,
get
I
rid
never
of it.
tried to. I never tried to fight it or manage it. Yeah, no,
You
not at
just
all. No,
you just embraced it.
just welcomed it. Yeah,
Oh, that's
because they're not gonna. It's you can't. The more you fight it, the worse it's going to be. So that's pretty much the way you have to do everything in your life. Is if you embrace everything, you're going to have fewer problems.
interesting. Now, uh, I'm going to go out on a limb here. Me personally, I have not ever been a super competitive person. I've always been after excellence. I got
Okay.
started playing guitar, and there's really no such thing as a judge of a guitar player. You just, you're getting better, but you're not trying to be better than anybody else. You're trying to be the best you can be. And for
Sure.
me, the winning that I was able to do was a byproduct of seeking excellence, not from being a super competitive person. Would you describe yourself as more competitive or more into excellence?
No, exactly. I'm exactly the same person you are.
Okay.
Um, and then I have a pretty. I realized later in life that I have a pretty vicious competitive streak in me, but it wasn't. Whatever I become interested in becoming good at, I, I'm just relentless, no matter what it was, shooting pool or throwing darts or whatever. But to describe myself, how I feel when I'm training, going to competitions, it's strictly personal mastery is my whole goal is just becoming as skilled as I can become and then maintaining that skill in a high pressure environment.
I wonder if that helped you either embrace or manage some of the pressure and anxiety because you probably weren't worried, or maybe you were. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but were were you more interested in performing your best, or were you more interested in
Yes,
winning?
performing my best.
And so
And
where the standings came out wasn't near as important as how you felt you did.
definitely,
Yeah,
yeah. But
there's
if I did, I trained in all the types of matches, IPSC makeup or steel challenge or whatever. I knew from my training that if I just shot to my capacity in a match, I could finish in the top 5, win possibly or whatever. I knew I'd be happy. That was my goal, was to shoot as good as I. Nothing would frustrate me more than to, mess up a stage at the IPSC Nationals or whatever, just because of something I did wrong or. I was too nervous or whatever. I was rushing too much, or that's what causes most of the problems. You're always trying to go too faster than you should be. Um,
Yeah, we call that rush, try, hurry, fail, and that
yeah,
that progression
that's
is
how it
just
goes.
inevitable.
Yep.
Maybe you can hook up on a stage, but certainly not for an entire match, and certainly not for a multi-day match. Will that ever work?
Yeah. Definitely.
Um, and speaking of you in competition, I remember a story about you at a Bianchi match. As I recall, this was a time when going 1 for 1 on the plate event wasn't necessarily a sure thing like it is now.
Right.
And was there a time where you cleaned the plate rack maybe for the first time ever and then shot and shot and shot?
Yeah, that was 1983. That was the year that I won the first time. Yeah, and I ended up shooting 505 plates in a row before I missed one on purpose.
Was that at the 25-yard line?
That was all. Those plates were all shot at the 25-yard line. Yeah,
You went 505 shot, and was that standing or was that prone?
standing.
Yeah,
I
because
preferred to shoot standing. I was a better standing shooter. I could just
I
stand there
know
and just let them go. Yeah.
And these wimps now are going prone at like the 15 and maybe even the
15-yard
10.
line. Yeah. Yep.
That's unbelievable. So 505. We shot a little bit of Bianchi here locally, and primarily I did it because you did it. And I thought it was phenomenal practice for the IPSC, which was what I really loved, was the IPSC.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget, I cleaned the plate rack one time, and it never occurred to me to go standing, but I just remember watching that dot come into that plate for the very last time and knowing it was going to fall.
Nice. Yeah. That's a good feeling. Yeah.
And you did that 505 times at the 25-yard line?
I was in the groove that day. I couldn't miss. Yeah. I was seeing everything went into slow motion. I was seeing the bullet marks as they hit the plate, and watching the bullet splatter. I could see the bullet impact as it hit the plate, and see the plate falling backwards like in slow motion.
Oh, that's amazing. Now, this was probably iron sights too, right? This wasn't a dot.
This was a dot.
Oh, it was a dot. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. And we're going to talk about dot versus irons here very shortly. My next question has to do with your preparation for Steel Challenge, Bianchi, and IPSC. Right. Did you try to maintain those skills all at the same time, or did you go through specialties at different times?
No, they're completely different.
Okay.
They require completely different skill sets. So yeah, I never tried to maintain or mix or do any of that. If I'm training for an IPSC match, it's just that. Training for a Steel Challenge, that's all I'm doing.
Okay.
Same with Bianchi, yeah.
And when you were training for Steel Challenge specifically, would you just shoot the stages over and over again, or did you break them down into components, or how would you prepare for that?
Pretty much over.
Oh, I lost you for a minute there. Go again, please.
I would always shoot the entire string of fire.
Okay.
I would always shoot the entire string of fire, but then you would mentally you might break down like a speed option. You might think of what you would see, how you would see on the first three plates versus, then maybe you might have a different visualization for the fourth and fifth plate. But yeah, always practice the entire course of fire. Meaning
you would know what
like I know I need to see a stop sight picture on this target. I can see the sight picture moving across this target as I shoot it.
I see.
I know I need to see I need to see not only a stop, but a slightly paused. For sure, I'm seeing the stopped sight picture on this target type of thing. Just different visual cues to make sure you hit each target.
And okay, so you've run 5 strings, and now you're starting to think about what you can get away with, would be what I would call that. I encourage people to start thinking about, okay, this is what's perfect. Now let's find out what you can get away with and still make and call a good shot.
Yeah, right.
And that's probably where the speed comes from, right?
Exactly.
Isn't that where you can shave hundreds?
Yeah. Yep.
Because that was my next question. If we're doing all 5 strings, where were you looking for speed?
At every moment. In every moment. It was the most efficient way to do, to see, to do and see at every single second, every single moment. Yeah.
That's awesome. And these were digital shot timers by this time, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Mm-hmm. When did those come out? Do you remember?
That would have been probably early 80s. I remember the first Steel Challenge that I shot, I think, was 1981. It might have been the first one. And I practiced for that. I didn't, it was poor. I didn't have steel targets, or I just stapled paper plates, 9-inch paper plates to sticks out in the desert. And that's how I practiced that. I just tried to simulate the course as close as I could. And when I got to the match, it was nothing at all like I practiced. But I'm pretty sure those were still stopwatch days. And then when I got to the Steel Challenge, of course, it was all digitally timed. They just had the timer started, and then there was an actual physical thing fixed to the stop plate that shut the time off.
Right.
When you hit it.
Now, that brings up a very interesting point, because I have told people that because Steel Challenge is basically shot calling and transitions, there's really nothing else to it. If people would shoot on paper instead of steel, they'd get better a lot faster, but they'd quit going to the match.
That's very well said. Yeah, I would agree with that. The steel is fun, but shooting on paper is where because we would shoot, like me and Robbie practiced in the desert, like I said, shooting on paper plates, and you shoot your 5 runs, and you go hoping you see 5 hits on each paper plate, and then that's a much better way to train than shooting at steel.
I agree, because we get so conditioned to the damn ding. And I know I said no cursing, but that's as far as we go, is damn.
Okay. Yeah.
And one of the easiest ways to irritate me when I'm doing a class with people is, the guy says, "Well, I thought I heard the ding."
That's the worst thing you could say.
I know.
Yeah.
And luckily I know he's going to say it before he even opens his mouth.
Right.
So I'm ready for it. And then I'll say, okay, well, let's say you're at a steel challenge match. You might hear a ding from the stage next door. Are you going to react to that?
Yeah.
It's fascinating. So that brings us to our next topic. Oh, and one more question about steel challenge, but I think you already answered it. I never studied it as its own sport. I always just shot it because it was the next weekend, and it was trigger time. So I never studied that sport a bunch. But I think you already answered this question. Stopping on each plate is not necessarily required, right?
Yeah, not necessarily. On some of the targets back in the day, I can't remember, the Smoke and Hope stage wasn't one of the original stages, but that stage that they shoot now, if they still shoot it,
they do.
That didn't require any stopping,
right?
Except for the stoplight. Yeah.
But it still requires seeing something.
It requires seeing something, exactly. What it required for me was, it's actually easy to shoot without seeing anything, as probably a lot of you guys out there will know. And then all you need to see on that stage is you need to see down you need to see the slide on the target.
Mm-hmm.
And if you didn't see that, you could miss one of those targets.
Pretty humbling when that happens, when you miss the refrigerator.
If you just saw the slide on the target, then you would hit it.
Now this
right.
This next question might get me into trouble, and me, not you. I have been telling people that they are not allowed to point shoot dot guns. They're just not allowed to do it. Do you think there's ever a time where somebody should or could point shoot a dot gun?
What do you mean? Explain what you mean by point shoot a dot gun. You talking about like a carry optic gun? Or?
Yeah, or an open gun.
Open gun, okay.
No,
I would never point shoot. I would always see the dot, no matter what. No matter how close the target was.
Thank God. I was really nervous about that one, Brian. I was shaking a little bit.
I've never really went down the point shooting trail. Like, you can see your sights on a pistol, iron sights on a pistol, as fast as you can not see them.
I agree.
I learned that lesson early on. So there's no reason to not ever see your sights.
And I feel like the dot is like the greatest thing to ever happen to a handgun. Yeah. And to have that tool and not use it just seems asinine to me, because it makes it so easy.
Yeah, it does.
Boy, I'm so glad you said. So, folks, you just heard it. If it's not good enough coming from me, take it from Brian Enos. Brian Enos says you're not allowed to point shoot your dot guns.
Or any other guns, for that matter.
Oh, he even went one step further. Yeah, and because, you always have time to see something.
Yes.
And seeing something is going to give you the speed you want and the accuracy you need. Whereas, seeing nothing, you could get lucky every now and then, but that luck is going to run out.
Yeah. You're always going to lose in the end, yeah.
All right, so let's get on to one of my favorite topics, calling the shot. What is calling the shot, and what is calling the shot not?
Calling the shot is, at the instant the shot fires, from seeing what you need to see to know exactly where the bullet will go. You can say it a bunch of different ways. You can also say it like, at the instant the shot fires, if you hit the intended target or not. So that translates to whatever the intended target is. If it's the A box of a IPSC target at 5 yards, 50 yards, 25 yards. If it's a steel plate at any distance, never relying on sound. It has to be an instant knowing of where the bullet will hit the target at the instant the shot fired. And you can practice. I even took that to the point to where, like, for many, many years, I would start and end every practice session with slow fire groups at 25 yards on a paper plate. And my goal would be to call the shots. Like, if I could shoot standing. Say I shot a 2-inch group standing at 25 yards. It wasn't good enough just to shoot a 2-inch group. It was good enough to know where each one of those bullets hit in that 2-inch group. you want your shot calling. The goal was to be that precise. Like if I
Yeah.
was shooting a bullseye match, cross training for the Masters or whatever, and I would look, shoot a slow fire 10-shot group at 25 yards with your spotting scope set up on the bench. I remember the best group I ever shot was, I think it was all 10s, mostly all X's, but I called every one of those shots where it was on the target individually. I'd fire the shot, look in the scope, and the bullet was exactly on the target where I thought it was going to be.
So I spent probably 5 years, maybe not that long, because I was pretty active on the Brian Enos forums pretty early in those early days. I don't know exactly when you started it, but I came along fairly soon after because the internet was brand new at that time, or
Yeah.
relatively new. And I thought that calling your shot was not missing. And it probably took me, I know,
Yeah.
it probably took me 5 years, including won nationals on the super squad as a grandmaster, laboring under the belief that shot calling. Are you laughing at me, Brian Enos?
No, switching my earplugs.
Okay.
Hilarious.
And I thought that shot calling was not missing, and it made me exceedingly accurate, but it made me a little slow compared
A
to
little
everybody
slower,
else.
Yep.
And I get a lot of people, and basically I've been doing a podcast about shot calling and what I call match mode for about 7 years now. Once I understood the difference between shot calling and bullseye mode, it was like the world's greatest light switch.
Nice. Yeah. Okay. That makes total sense. Yeah.
And to me, everybody says when you get somebody who's fast and sloppy, the first thing they say, and they've probably been saying it since 1978, slow down and get your hits, right? Were they saying that back then? You need to slow down and get your hits?
So the better thing to say is you need to say slow down and see what you need to see to know where your hits went.
Well, my thing is, let's not slow down. Let's just get our hits. And if we see an
just
error,
just see. Yeah. There you go.
And shoot at
Even better, yeah.
shoot at the speed of sight.
Yes.
And once I understood that and have been able to explain that to people, it's so good because how do you know how much to slow down, right?
Right. Yeah.
But
the whole slow down thing is a fallacy. I shouldn't have ever spoken that, and no one should ever say that. Just see what you need to see to know where the shots went as you shot them.
yeah. And if, because we don't have time for perfect shots in IPSC and USPSA. Right. We have time for good enough shots, and I call those acceptable shots.
Okay. Yes. Exactly. Yeah.
All right. Well, so just summarize for people. See, these people, Brian, have been listening to me say it literally 3 times a week for 7 years. So if somebody wrote you a letter and say, Brian, I thought I was calling my shots, but I'm still slow. What am I doing wrong? How would you answer that question?
I would get rid of the concept of slow or fast and learn what it means to call your shot and just do that. Wonderful. And like I said at the beginning, to call your shot means to know at the instant the bullet fired where it will hit the target. Yeah.
And what I love that you said is it's relative to the distance or difficulty of the target.
Yeah. Yeah. What you need to see, call. And incidentally, but that was one of the first. I recently got this blog up. I think you mentioned you had mentioned that at some point. But while we're on this topic, that was pretty sure that was because that after the obligatory bio post for the blog, the very first topic I posted was the call on calling the shots, called the call to shoot revisited.
Yep, I read that.
That's the most important topic to me that there is, basically.
I agree. And here's the other one. I think a lot of people have trouble seeing the sight lift for numerous reasons.
Blinking.
Oh, you think blinking's the most common?
Yes, that's another massively important topic that I think I talked about that some in the call to shoot. And then at some point, about maybe 5 topics down the road, I've got a whole topic devoted just to blinking.
Interesting.
Because it's hardly ever taught. You could say never. It's never taught in firearms instruction, and it's like the worst thing you can do is blink at the instant the shot fires, and it's the most natural thing to do.
Right, because the
Like
body
that's
doesn't like any of that. It doesn't like
no,
the.
it's like I said in that article. If you put a firecracker in a pair of pliers and lit it and held it in front of your face, and when it goes off, what are you going to do? You're going to blink.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to learn to counteract the completely natural reaction, but you can do it, and you have to do it.
Right.
You know, you have to. Your eyes have to stay open all the time. You have no hope of any sort of consistent success.
All right. So while we're on that topic, I believe you used to be an advocate of clear tape over one of the lenses as opposed to blinking or squinting. Is that correct?
I went through a lot of phases. So I'm cross-eye dominant. So most of my career, I started out closing my left eye and aiming with my right eye, and then after a little while, I realized that it was actually a lot better to leave both eyes open and then just put a little piece of clear tape on the non-dominant lens, just enough to block out the front sight, so I'd get rid of the double vision. That worked a lot better because now like if you close one eye, now your other pupil opens, trying to compensate for the whatever light you're in, and now it's not able to focus as well because of that. So leaving both your eyes open and using the tape just allows your pupil for your aiming eye to stay at the right dilation for the light you're in, and so you'll be able to see more accurately, more clearly. That had nothing to do with blinking. It was just a way of not having to close my non-dominant eye so I wouldn't get double vision.
Interesting. And what do you think? Is there anything else people are giving up or losing by closing or squinting the other eye? To me, it seems to affect transitions.
Yeah, I never really thought that. Like when I was closing an eye still, shooting early steel challenge days, it's all transitions. I could transition.
You didn't think that was an issue?
Like it would in theory, but this is how you can prove it to yourself. So if you're next time you go out to the range and you spread some targets out and spread them out pretty wide, like maybe an outer limits type stage or something, the target that you're currently aiming at, or whatever target you're shooting in that string, if you can see the next target you're going to shoot with your aiming eye, then that's not going to affect your transition speed because the next target is in your peripheral vision of your aiming eye.
Okay.
And that's the determining factor. If you set the targets so far apart, like on opposite sides of the range, where like say you're aiming with your right eye and you shoot the right target first, and you actually can't see the left target with your right eye, then it might be a little bit helpful to have your left eye open, but probably not even then. And that just never happens.
Right. Yeah, that's like a complete 180 shot. That's
almost, yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
That's a bunch. Now, for somebody that's shooting iron sights and cross dominant or not, what advice would you give them? Would you tell them to open up the other eye right away and just suck it up and deal with it, or would you try to ease them into it?
It's a totally personal thing. This topic has just been going on forever, and you just have to experiment and figure out what's best for you. Everybody's eyesight is different, and what works for me won't work for you, or may not. You just have to try everything.
And the other frustrating thing is, no matter how well or how often or how much you discuss it, it's not possible for me to see what you see. It's not possible for you to see what I see. Therefore, it's like talking about the color purple to a blind man. It's really not even possible.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's the end of the story right there. Yeah, you just have to experiment, try everything, see what works best for you, and don't listen to anybody else.
Okay.
On that particular topic.
Sure. Now, one of the things that you used to talk about was roughly, I believe it was 5 levels of focus.
Yep.
And one thing that we're hearing now is we hear a lot of people advocating either primary or complete target focus. One thing that I really enjoy helping people see is I believe that if the sights are aligned acceptably on target, it doesn't really matter that much what you look at. Do you think that's true?
No. For this topic, like I would tend to always want to talk about some shooting scenario that's specific, like what the target size is and at what distance it's at. And to say we're going to assume iron sights.
Okay.
And there's just hardly ever a time when you can't actually see the front sight, razor sharp as the shot fires, even on really close targets, man. I can still remember stages from 35 years ago, that I can just see a razor crisp front sight bouncing up and down from target to target. Um, to me, it was, for me anyways, and not everybody's like this, of course, just like everything, but I found that if I could get onto that front sight, as soon as I could get onto that front sight, the more consistently I shot. So like say you're shooting a stage, I believe this is also maybe a little bit in that blog article on the Call to Shoot. You see the sight lift you're seeing the sight lift from the last shot on the target, and then your eye immediately, so you called that shot quickly because you saw the sight lift, and that confidence, that doubt-free state that you're in, allows your eye to quickly locate the next target, and then whatever that target is, if you're looking just at the A box, if you can see the outline, if you can see the A box on the target, then always just look at that. Never move your eyes to brown. Just always move to the smallest spot you can see.
Sure.
And then that just basically sort of repeats itself. That you see the sights. If your eye basically needs to get to the target before your gun does.
Right.
So if it does, then if your eye gets to a specific spot, your gun will just naturally land there without any effort of your own. Your sights will land there, and then by the time your gun is stopped on that spot, your vision needs to be back. You have enough time for your vision to be back on your front sight. So now you can call a shot. So from what I'm guessing I heard you say, you might have some targets where you would consider like maybe a 10-yard IPSC target or whatever. You're hitting the A box without looking at the front sight just because you can see like a sight picture in the A box.
Correct.
Correct? Yeah. Yeah, I very...
I lost you there for a minute. Go ahead.
I was being sloppy.
Say that one more time, please.
If I did shoot like what you described, I felt like I was being sloppy if I did shoot like that.
Okay. What if you could call two good shots in that environment? Or could you?
I could never, like when I'm on the front sight, the call could not possibly be improved.
Of course.
And I can be on the front sight in any target scenario. So then that's just what I did. Yeah.
And then
that's what was my goal.
What about your 5 levels of focus, where you talked about what you needed to see for 5 different kinds of shots? Am I remembering that correctly?
And after some time, I almost regretted putting that in the book.
Really?
Yeah, but I don't know, because people got stuck on it. Like people will come up to you a match and what you're going to shoot this with type 3 or I don't know. Maybe it was beneficial or useful, but that was something that I kind of put together. Like I never thought about that before I wrote that for that book. I can't remember what the origin was. The guy that was publishing it at the time might have asked me something. I might have just came up with it on my own. It's been so long ago, I can't honestly say. But I think my best guess would be at one point someday I just sat down and thought I could categorize 5 different types of seeing. And then that's where that came from.
Well, there's a funny thing. When you go to write a book, you have to find a way to put what you believe into words.
Yeah.
And that can be very challenging.
Yes.
And what's fascinating about that is when I give classes, I say, the great Brian Enos wrote about 5 different levels of vision. I can't remember what all of them are, but I will tell you this. What you need to see is the same thing to make the shot and the same thing to call the shot. So if you can call the shot with an acceptable degree of accuracy, you've seen what you need to see, and that's the most important thing.
That is correct. Yep.
See, that wasn't so bad. You scared me there for a minute, but I think we're back on track.
Okay, cool.
I just, your understanding of these things. Everybody is so respectful of it, but I just want to make sure I get it right.
Okay.
And those 5 levels of vision. You talked. The analogy I make is, let's say that you want to shoot a barn. You don't need to see a whole lot to shoot a barn and to know you've hit the barn.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
You need to see something. You don't need to see much.
Yeah.
But if you want to shoot the latch on the barn door at 25 yards, now you need to see a bunch.
Yeah.
And
yeah, exactly. And as you were from this conversation, like what I think I might be realizing is that to summarize, shot calling is like we said, you need to see what you need to see at the instant of the shot fired to know exactly where the bullet will go. And then how you do that is endless. And so the 5 categories are just like aids to help you to get you to kind of show you what you need to see on various 5 target scenarios.
Yeah, and one of the reasons that I tried to get people away from necessarily categorizing 5 different ways is the trouble I had whenever I would go from a dot back to irons is I would tell myself what I needed to see and get real strict about, okay, front sight here, front sight here, front sight here. And my mind would reject that either because it was slow or it felt slow.
That's slow, yeah.
But if I quit giving myself all those commands and just saw what I needed to see, it was fine.
Nice, yeah.
It was totally fine, you know. All right, so that brings us to dot versus irons. Some people believe that if you're struggling with irons, you should shoot a dot for a little while, and if you're struggling with a dot, you should shoot irons for a little while, as if one helps the other. What do you think of that?
I don't have any. I wouldn't do any of those things.
Okay.
If you're struggling with something, then figure it out. Stick with it. Figure it out. I never related dot to irons at all. They were just, like with a dot sight, it's very simple. Your focus never leaves the target.
Right.
You're never trying to see the dot, so it just makes shooting so easy. You just look at the target. With iron sights, your vision is constantly moving. That's what keep your eyes moving was the key phrase for me. Target sight, target sight, target sight, target sight. Never. Always. Your vision is constantly moving. In out, in out, in out.
Right. Right.
And that's if your eyes are not doing that, like especially in a match, the higher level of match, the more pressure you're under.
Right, and you've always got
your vision's included with that.
Sure.
And so so you won't be the fluid target sights that you have in the practice range may not be happening. You may just be frozen somewhere halfway in between either one of them, and your shooting will suffer accordingly.
I think there's a lot of people who have done that. They sort of get into a specific kind of vision or lack thereof and shoot the whole match that way, and then they wonder what the hell happened.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it happens to about everybody probably.
Yeah, and it seems to me, and granted, you and I haven't ever spoken before, but it seems to me like you were not very prone to repeating the same mistake over and over and over again.
That's probably fairly accurate. I'm a good learner, no matter what the topic. It's just been a natural thing for me, and so I learned. I definitely was one to learn from mistakes. Pinpoint figuring out what the error was, and then taking steps to correct it.
Yeah, and one of the things that I say in class over and over again is that I always say shooters do a funny thing. They find a process that works, and they get a desired result, and then they gleefully disregard the process and go looking for the result.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
Why do you think they do that?
I don't know. Maybe it's just something as simple as a human, just a way you've lived, the way we do everything, like just a basic human tendency is to go for the result.
Yeah, I personally think it has to do that whenever somebody makes an accuracy breakthrough, they complain that it was slow, and whenever they make a speed breakthrough, they complain that it was inaccurate. And it seems to me like they're always trying to get faster and more accurate, like at the exact same moment. And I just don't. I don't believe that's possible. Do you believe it's possible to get faster and more accurate at the same time?
I don't know if I could relate to any of that. Just like my personal history experience is, I started out as an accurate shooter. That's what I was interested in. Before I shot competition, just shooting in the woods or the desert or whatever, all I cared about was accuracy. Like pinpoint, just like very precise accuracy. I wanted to be able to shoot as tight a groups as the gun could shoot, hit as smallest target as could possibly be hit at whatever distance. So that's how I started shooting speed-oriented IPSC type stuff. And so what I had to learn was how to, like we talked about in the beginning, how to learn to call the shot quicker by seeing more than just a stop sight picture on every target.
Right. Learn what you can get away with.
Yeah.
All right. So these next ones are. Oh, and by the way, whenever just to wrap up that last question, I don't know that there's a lot you can learn from mixing dots and irons, but I do think it can
No,
be easier to call the shot with a dot. And
absolutely.
and I
A million
think
times easier, yeah.
yeah, and I think that once you learn to see the dot lift, it may be easier to come back over to irons and try to replicate that experience, or at least
There may
know.
be something there, yeah, yeah. That makes sense in a way, yeah.
And it's like, hey, we've experienced this now. We've seen this thing lift. Now that we know what we're looking for, let's go
Mm-hmm.
back to the other gun and see if we can see it there. Would be about
Okay,
the
yeah,
only thing I could see.
wouldn't argue with that, yeah.
All right, the next ones are super super easy.
Okay.
Gun setup, recoil spring, light or heavy.
Light for me, all the guns. It doesn't make the heavy spring just made the slide coming back just a harder push for me.
Okay.
I just want the thing to just flip back and forth real quick.
And one thing I remember, either from the forums or from the book, is the recoil spring only needs to chamber the next round. It's its only job.
That's it. Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
And does it need to protect the frame in your
No.
experience? It doesn't.
No.
Okay. And you are pro shock buff, correct? Are you still pro shock buff?
Yeah, I was still, yeah, when I was shooting, if I could put a shock buff in my gun, I'd have one in there. If I had a couple guns I could put two in, I'd have two of them in there.
And was that to make it softer, or was that to shorten the stroke, or what was that all
A
about?
little of both. Yeah,
Okay.
shorten the stroke and make it feel a little softer, yeah.
Okay. I believe you advocated the thumb of the weak hand, or maybe both hands, doesn't necessarily need to touch the frame. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Keep the thumbs off keep the thumbs off the frame, yeah. Because
That's a hard thing to do.
you're very, like the right thumb is clamping down on the grip, is clamping down on the thumb safety, and then the left thumb, getting back to the blog article, I think I just put that article up on the neutral grip, and there's a really good picture of it in there, whereas you're the target,
I lost you for a
not touching
second.
the frame anywhere.
I lost
And
you
for
for a
me,
second. Can you repeat that last sentence, please?
okay. The weekend thumb is not touching the frame and pointing straight at the target.
Okay.
And for me, keeping that thumb off the frame, what it did was it just increased consistency of sight tracking from no pressure at the practice range to a lot of pressure at the match, because your grip, when you're under stress pressure, your grip isn't at the match. It probably isn't the same grip that you're practicing with.
Right.
And so if you're cranking onto that frame, if you're touching the frame in practice in a match, you're probably pushing on it harder. And so that's going to just cause your sight to track more inconsistently under pressure.
So it's maybe a case of, instead of this thumb doing something and practice something in a match, if we keep it off of there, it can't do anything, and therefore we can rule that as a variable.
Yeah, can't hurt. Yeah.
Interesting. I'll have to go out and shoot some rounds. I don't think I've ever intentionally tried to keep my thumb off the frame of a pistol.
Yeah, that started. I remember. I mean, my thumb used to touch the frame, and then occasionally it would, you'd be under a little bit more stress, and it would get up on the slide, start slowing the slide down, and cause jams. And I don't know how many people I've seen over the years had a jam in a match because their thumb touched the slide when normally it wouldn't have.
Mm-hmm.
But to me, shooting the speed, no matter how fast you're trying to shoot on the closest target, having your thumb on the frame provides no additional recovery speed. It's all done with the grip. It's all done with the neutral grip, or with whatever grip is working for you. But again, what you want is repeatability, no matter how casual you're feeling or how jacked up you're feeling. You want the gun to track exactly the same way.
Now that brings up an interesting thing. Have you ever shot a gun with a thumb rest, or what they sometimes call a gas pedal?
Pedal, no.
Okay, so now they're making these things. You can call it a thumb rest, or you can call it a gas pedal.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, and those were initially sold as a recoil management device.
Right.
And I resisted them for the longest time, and then I actually felt one and realized, holy moly, my hands are in the exact same place every single time.
Yeah, I could see that.
And that's
I never tried one, but I could see that. Yeah.
That's what I really liked about it. To be honest, I don't know if it was a recoil thing, but I loved how it gave me a place for that stupid weak hand thumb. Finally, after all these years, And I
Yeah.
put it there, and it knows where it's supposed to be, and it just made everything so much happier. If you ever get a
Okay.
chance, if you ever get bored, you might try one.
Okay.
I don't, I don't think you get bored much, though, do you, Brian?
Oh no. I realized that when I was 16 years old. My brother, who was 3 years older than me, said I'm bored, and I realized I had no idea what that meant. Um, that's funny. There's always something to think about, something to wonder about.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
All right,
I've been bored my whole life. Anyways, yeah.
a little bit more technical stuff. Trigger weight. How important is it, and how light should it be?
That was a personal thing for me. I became a really competent at doing my own trigger jobs. We had the good fortune back in the early Southwest Pistol League days. Jack Breskovich, who was the master of the light trigger at that time, he spread all his stuff out on a blanket in the grass at the Southwest Pistol League and showed us his theory. Not the theory, how he actually got his trigger pulls, 2-pound trigger pulls at that time, that were unheard of. So yeah, I like the really light trigger. I did it myself. Um, if I could have a pound and a half, 2-pound trigger, I would never have more than a 2-pound trigger on any gun.
Yeah, they've got some now that are. There's guys running some that are under a pound.
Under a pound, yeah, I wouldn't be
Yeah.
surprised. Yeah, we did all this by hand. It was all just hand. It was all done on the angle of the sear nose.
Wow.
The goal being that as the sear tracks across the hammer hook, if you had a dial indicator on the hammer hook and you had locked in a vise, there would be zero movement
Wow.
on the hammer. So yeah, me and Robbie got to be really good at that.
See, that's something I have never been much of a technical guy.
Yeah,
For me, it was always I'm going to pay somebody or buy something that works, and when
yeah,
it stops working, I'm going to take it back to them and say,
yeah,
"Please fix this," so I can continue
sure.
shooting it.
Yeah,
I don't want anything to do with that stuff.
yeah. That's been in my nature since I was a kid. I'm super mechanical. Worked out my life as a mechanic. I'm really good with tools and fixing stuff and figuring out the best way to make anything work.
I wonder if that helped with your desire to
About
not
half
make.
the population, the other half aren't like that at all. Yeah.
Well, I just wonder if maybe that helped your understanding of not wanting to make the same mistake over and over and over again. Because if you're working with tools and you make a mistake, something bad happens. You're probably not
Okay.
inclined to make that mistake again.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Right. All right. Next question is about ammunition. With a non-compensated firearm, do you want a light bullet or a heavy bullet?
I experimented, went back and forth on that over the years, and that would depend. Non-compensated, um, I honestly couldn't say where I ended up. I just always was experimenting. Like say a 40 caliber, I'd probably settle on 180 grain bullets, 45s. Sometimes I like 200s. Sometimes I like 230s.
Okay.
Yeah, don't have a clear answer on that.
One of the things that I've learned in standing behind people and watching them shoot and all the rest of it is the heavier bullet, in my opinion, can make the sight lift a little easier to see,
Hmm.
and I think it slows the slide down. Do you think that's fair to say?
Definitely slows the slide down. Make
Uh,
it might the the time period you're talking about to see the sight lift. I mean, in theory, yeah, maybe, but actually, I doubt it. Um, but yeah, it
it's just
definitely slows the slide down for sure. It's definitely a more rolling. The heavier the bullet, the more kind of rolling the recoil feel, as opposed to the lighter bullets, more snappy.
and then on the other side, I feel like once we've seen it lift, a
Yeah.
an absurd heavy bullet might slow down the return, which sort of brings up a different problem.
Okay. Yeah, I understand what you're saying, but that wouldn't have been anything I would have ever considered.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So you were just trying different stuff all the
Feel.
time.
It was,
Okay.
yeah, for me, it was what felt the best. It was probably difficult to describe it objectively, but, I'd like how this feels right now, so that's what I'm shooting.
Okay. And on sights, um, black front sight or fiber optic front sight?
Black, I was pretty much black. I had a couple fiber optics, but the only time a fiber optic ever really helped I thought was ever an actual advantage is if the lighting conditions were so poor, you were like in a building or something, or that you hardly had trouble seeing the front sight.
Okay.
And then it would help you find it. But yeah, sights for me, what I ended up settling on was black, sharp, crisp, square front, even slightly undercut front sight, and I wanted about visually whatever this would be for you. You're arm's length and distance from your eyes. I wanted the total of the two light bars to equal the width of the front sight.
Yeah, a lot of light back there.
A lot of light, yeah.
Yeah. And I have a theory about that. And again, this is just me explaining my idea. I feel like if there's more space to work with, we can center an object a little quicker than if there's less space to work with.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
I agree. Yeah.
That's also my theory on dot sizes. There's a glut of pistol optics coming out now that are as small as 2 and 3 MOAs. And I think those things take longer. Number one, I think they're harder to see than a 6.
Okay.
Number two, I think we center them quicker, again, because they're a little larger, and I think our brains are happier with a rougher center and a larger dot. What do you think of that?
That all makes perfect sense to me, yeah.
Okay. What kind of dots were you guys running back then? That was pretty new in handgun dots.
It was, yeah, and I'm not going to be able to say. Maybe 8, 10, 12, something like that. It's been so long ago.
Really, that big?
Maybe 6 being maybe the smallest. I think in the earlier days, I can't remember, probably in the 8 to 10 zone.
So it was at least a 6.
At least a 6.
Yeah.
For sure, yeah.
And there are some rumors now that some of these young open shooters are back to running 8s and 10s.
Okay.
And I'm not sure there's a downside for IPSC.
Not at all.
Maybe certainly
so.
you might get too big eventually, but it'd be a very long time, right?
Yes, I would totally agree with that. Yeah.
Okay. Now let's talk about dry fire. When you were coming up, did you dry fire very much?
Continuously.
Really?
Yeah. I'd say I dry fire I never stopped dry firing.
Really?
20 years of competition. Yeah.
And what kinds of things would you do?
I do a lot of. I just did my main thing was just drawing, just dry draws, just over and over and over. Mag changes, lots of mag changes in the dark, drawing too. Like I think I can't remember if I put some fire drills. So you want to the end goal is you want to be able to draw with your eyes closed to a absolutely perfectly aligned sight picture every time.
Yep, I remember reading that one. Yep.
Yeah, and then later you can even substitute, or you can add, not substitute, you can add a target that you're drawing. Like if you have like a little spot on your wall, and you can draw to that with a perfectly aligned sight picture every time with your eyes closed. When you open your eyes, it's right on the target.
Yeah, and that builds what used to be called muscle memory, and now
index.
Index, right? And now they've actually come up with a scientific term for it called myelin. You ever heard of myelin?
I have not heard of that. How do you spell it?
MYELIN. So scientists have figured out that every time your brain forms a connection, and it wraps that in this physical substance called myelin, and when you repeat the activity, that substance grows. So I just think of it as wrapping duct tape on whatever your brain needs to do something. It says, okay, this is how this works, and it wraps duct tape on it.
Okay.
And that's the scientific explanation for muscle memory. And
interesting. No, I want to do some reading on that. I haven't heard anything about that.
Yeah, there's a book called The Talent Code by a guy whose last name is, I think it's Daniel Coyle, Coyle.
Okay.
And his goal was to study prodigies. And what he found about prodigies was most of them were exposed to damn near 10,000 hours of either observation or actual practice. And turns out they weren't born being able to play chess. He wanted to debunk that whole born.
Okay, born, okay.
Yeah, because nobody comes out of the womb and can play chess, so there has to be some kind of exposure to the craft. But yeah, check that out if you have time to read.
Do they think is it possible for like a specific amount of myelin or whatever, the way you described it, to be passed genetically?
That's not discussed.
Okay.
And
that was because we used to have a joke about David Tubb. His father was a world champion rifle shooter, and we used to say he came out of the womb with a rifle in his hand.
Well, that may be more true than you realize. So if you're a kid and you're 2 or 3 years old and all you know about your dad is he's always holding a rifle, you're going to be holding a rifle pretty soon.
Yep.
And you're probably going to be holding a rifle sooner and more often than somebody whose dad is not a rifle champion.
Exactly. Yeah.
And that's pretty much what this book discovers, is that you're going to find some number of hours of very purposeful, very mindful, very good practice behind just about any prodigy.
Yes.
But yeah, check it out. We'll have to have the conversation on that.
I'm definitely going to check it out. I wrote it down.
And while we're talking about dry fire, I want to thank you for being my only wholesale client of Refinement Repetition.
You're welcome.
My wife has recently started helping out with the business here, and I was reading her one of your expletive-laden emails about how slow the books were. And she turns to me and she says, "Who's this Brian Enos guy, and why is he complaining that he never has any books?" And I said, "Ma'am, we don't talk about Brian Enos in that way. Mr. Enos gets his books as quickly as possible."
That's funny.
But you actually said something very nice about that book. Hopefully you remember, you said that if you've ever read Practical Shooting Beyond Fundamentals and wondered what to do next, well, this is what to do next.
Okay, I do remember that, yeah.
Because
when I was going, learning and dry firing, if I would have had your book, that would have been tremendously helpful. I didn't know, I didn't have any idea what to do other than draw to a perfect sight picture every time.
Yeah, my thing was I need to figure out what this sport requires and what they measure to make a grandmaster, and I'm going to get really, really good at those things.
Okay.
And at that time, it was most of the classifiers were draw, shoot 6, reload, and shoot 6. So I thought if I can draw, shoot 6 things really quickly, whether it's 2 on paper or mixing some steel in there, whatever it is, and then reload and do that again, I could be a grandmaster. I never cared about beating anybody, but coming out of the music business, my band was so close to success, and then we broke up right when Nirvana came out and changed the musical landscape. So I came out of the music business a failure.
Okay.
At least in my own mind. So it was super important for me to be great at something. And once I realized that I could shoot 6, reload, and shoot 6 more as quick as anybody else on the planet, that was pretty gratifying for me. And now being able to help other folks do that is even better.
Nice.
There's another story about dry fire, and I want to see if you can confirm this. You have said that Rob Latham never dry fired as a regimen or as in, putting on the belt, putting on the holster. But I believe you said that he was always tinkering with a gun, always had a gun in his hand.
Exactly. Anytime I'd be at his house, even in later years, when I had stopped shooting and I would be over there for dinner or whatever, he'd always had a gun out. He was just always handling some sort of a pistol.
Yeah.
Picking it up, putting it down, just picking it up, aiming at something, dropping the hammer. It's just a part of his body.
Right. And did you guys always practice together, or did you practice separately as well?
We went through a phases where we practiced, the first time we ever met, we just formed this crazy bond, and I was at his house, he was at my house. We were just talking, trying this, trying that, dry firing, whatever. And then we went through quite a few years where we practiced together. We would meet at the range. I would always be there on time. He would always be late. I would always have the stage set up by the time he got there, every single time. And it's hilarious.
And what kinds of things would you do in live fire? Was it
all different, whatever we just felt like doing. We would shoot standard drills, like we might make up a set of standards like you've never seen anymore that went out to 50 yards. Or
right.
We would set up, movement stages. We would just set up standard drill, just randomly put targets to help some field, just everything. Anything we thought we might see at a match, we would be trying to duplicate it in practice.
Okay. And what was your theory on movement back then? How did you look at movement, or how did you try to improve it?
So a teeny story on that is I never was a good movement shooter. Like Robbie was a total natural at that. Like he's a super, came into the sport as an athlete. I think he was scholarship level basketball player in high school, college or whatever. Like he's really just super fluid moving around on his feet. I was terrible at that. All my best courses of fire when I was beginning were stand-in shoots. If I didn't have to move, I'm going to smoke it down,
I see.
And then one day I there was a really tricky move and shoot course in Colorado. I remember at this match, and I knew I was just going to be terrible at it because it was like moving down this corridor, and the timing was if you were really good moving shooting, you could pretty much just move through the thing really quickly and be shooting continuously. But you were transitioning back and forth to the left and right. And I watched Robbie shoot it, and he smoked it as I predicted. And then somewhere, and at the time I had read some book, some sort of, I can't remember, it was the topic of the book. It's like more about some sort of new age BS or something like that. But I took a few good points out of it, and one of them was that if you're ever in a difficult situation, no matter what it is, like if you're going to do any particular task or speak or act or do anything that you don't good at, if you summon the image or the personality of a person that you know is good at it, and you don't even have to know this person, it could be like a movie star, how they would act in a particular situation. If you just try to summon their personality into your body and accept it, and I did that with Robbie, and I actually beat him on that stage. And it was like, I had no idea how I did it. Like there was nothing I could take. Normally I could take something away and I could say, okay, this is what I did and that's what I got. But that was all I had, was I just summoned his personality. And so then I went home and I actually spent 2 years on my own setting up assault stages, we called them then, and learning how to shoot them. Took me about 2 years, and then I felt like I could shoot on the move on par with anybody after that.
So you identified a weakness and turned it into a strength.
Exactly.
Outstanding. One question I get a bunch, especially this time of year, is I'm stuck indoors, indoor shooting ranges. Nobody really likes indoor shooting ranges that much. Yeah. What would you prescribe for somebody who's stuck at an indoor range all winter?
Well, my first thought was just shoot groups. That's what I always defaulted to. If you're talking about an indoor shooting range where you just got one lane to shoot in.
Yeah, and most of them.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, and they won't allow a draw. They won't allow anything considered rapid fire.
That's one of the reasons I left Ohio, was the only range I could shoot at, outdoor range at the time. Didn't allow either one of those two things.
Right.
But yeah, I would just try to shoot as small as groups you can shoot, and calling your shots within the groups. Calling a shot, shooting groups. There is no better practice than that.
Yeah, and those are things that being indoors kind of, in my mind, it makes it more challenging because the lighting conditions usually aren't as good.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. And if somebody's really having trouble calling their shots while they're shooting in groups, do you have any quick advice for them on that?
The first thing they need to do, I'm going to get this topic up on the blog here in a little bit on blinking. It's going to probably be another couple months, but the first thing they need to do is learn how to know on their own while they're shooting that they are not blinking as the shot fires.
Okay.
And it's helpful to, and I go pretty detailed on the blog topic coming up, but it's really helps is to have a friend who doesn't blink as you fire your shot, stand next to you, and just look right at your eye as you're shooting and tell you if you're blinking. Now you can now you're getting feedback as to whether you're blinking or not. And that really helps to speed up the process of learning to never blink is the goal.
Would you advocate double plugs for somebody who's blinking?
Everything you can do.
Okay.
Double plug, plugs and earmuffs and all that's good. I never liked headphones that much. To me, they felt like they insulated me too much from the environment. I'm sensitive, touchy-feely kind of person, so I always prefer to just shoot earplugs, just the things you stick in your ear, the long earplugs. Anything you can do to help you stop blinking that's the goal, is to never blink.
Okay. All right. And then shooting one-handed, should we cant the gun a little bit or hold it straight up and down?
I experimented with that, and then in the end, I just ended up holding it straight up and down.
Okay. Yeah, what I always tell people is, there's straight up and down, and then there's a little bit sideways.
Yeah.
Try it both ways. One way may feel better, one way may score better, but let's just try it both ways a little bit.
Exactly. Yep.
Okay. Now your next favorite topic. We're almost done. I told you it'd be 2 hours. We're actually doing pretty good. Zen. Give us I don't know, 3 minutes of Brian Enos on Zen.
Renaissance Zen. I'd never heard the word in my life until I was about 20 years old. I read the word Zen in a interview in a music magazine with John Denver, and he said that he had discovered Zen and it had changed his life. And the interviewer asked him, "What does Zen mean?" And he said, "What is," was his
Mm-hmm.
exact reply. When I read that, I knew that that had been what I had been waiting to hear up to that moment in my life. I put down the magazine, drove to the local bookstore, started buying books on Zen, and then never stopped. It's
Does it?
just the core message of Zen is to be aware of what you're doing, to be aware of what you're happening, be aware of what your mind is doing, be aware of whatever is happening. It's just to pay attention, be aware more, to eliminate distraction, to eliminate inadvertence, just be more aware. And so I found that that's a good way to be all the time.
I've struggled for whatever reason as I've gotten older. I've struggled with more anxiety than I've ever had in my life.
Okay.
And reading about Zen a little bit, and I don't remember if this was quoted attributed to Zen specifically, but anxiety is worrying about the future, depression is worried about the past. If you live in the present, you can make that a lot better, and that really helped me
Yeah.
a bunch
Okay, nice. That's well said. Yeah.
because all the things that I worry about, most of them don't ever happen,
That's
right? And that's
happened.
and that's just wasted time. And
Yeah.
it turns out the things that do happen
Yeah.
are the things I wasn't even thinking about. So
Exactly.
worrying about them is completely useless.
Yeah.
Um,
Um, yeah. I got a blog. Yeah.
I
There
lost
was
you
a
again.
fun.
Go ahead and repeat that last
I got
sentence,
a.
please.
There's a blog topic coming up on that exact topic that you just said too.
Really?
Yeah. I just got the rough draft going on it.
And what
Um,
what is the most direct correlation between Zen and shooting that you can think of?
it's a total correlation of paying attention.
Mm-hmm.
When you're with everything you do at the range, you need to be totally undistracted. You need to do exactly what you're thinking about all the time. You need to do exactly what you're doing. It's a 100% correlation between the two. There's no better there's no better thing you can do for your mind than to get a better understanding of paying attention, which is
And most of what I see
back to your
damage.
topic of worry.
Yeah.
Is that,
Sorry, go ahead. I lost you
um,
again.
I just I wanted to get this on the air on your topic of worry. I thought this was hilarious when I found this today. If you have a problem that can be fixed, there's no use in worrying. If you have a problem that cannot be fixed, then there's no use in worrying.
Yep.
That's great.
Yeah, because change the things you can change, and if you can't change it,
Exactly.
there's really no point in worrying
Leave it
about it.
alone. Yeah.
Yep.
But
Well,
a lot of it on that topic, just to throw in a little bit more, a lot of it is just habit. Our main mental enemy is just habit thinking. As you grow older, and if you don't become more aware that you're thinking and even what you're thinking about, your mind just flows. The habit develops stronger and stronger, like any, what you would call a physical habit. The mind operates exactly the same way. So it's important to set aside a few minutes each day and just get some books on Zen or meditation or whatever. Sit down, know that you're breathing for a few minutes. That's all you have to do. You don't have to count anything. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to sit in any special way. Just know you are aware. Know that you're breathing. Know you're breathing in. Know you're breathing out. Just do that. That'll settle your mind instantly.
hmm, that's fascinating. So back to shooting real quick, because
Okay.
otherwise my audience will lose interest. They don't care about any of this Zen crap, Brian. They just want to know
Okay.
how to
Gotcha.
shoot better.
Yeah. Okay.
Actually, that's not true. What they're interested in is what can I do to get better, and what can I do to perform well. One of the things that I see good shooters, do all the time is they worry more about what has just happened and what is going to happen, and they give up control of the present because they're worried about the future and the past.
Yeah. That's what we were just talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's I just wanted to put a little button on that for the people that are complaining that Brian and Steve are talking about anxiety. We don't care. We don't care. Get back to shooting. All right. So why? I don't know if you know this, but blogs have been around a while. Did you?
Yes.
Why did you choose now to start one?
That's a funny question because I have um, ever since the beginning of the forums. That was probably back in early 2000s. Any post that I've ever posted, I've saved it in a Word document and kept it in my computer.
Oh,
Um,
nice.
just because I thought maybe it was funny looking back on it now. It's not any different than the note taking I did when I was shooting. I just thought maybe it might be useful at some point. Had no plans for it. And then one day here, I don't know, a year or so ago, a friend asked me to help him with an article that he was working on for a magazine, and he wanted to know if he left anything out of this specific topic. And so I reviewed it. I took a look at it, and I said, yeah, there's a couple points that absolutely need to go in here that you completely omitted. And so I rewrote him a draft, and he sent it back to me. And after a couple times back and forth, I thought, this is perfect. And rather than throwing it out, I thought, well, I'll save this. I'll put it in with all my forum collection of posts. And I've got them organized in folders on like conceptual, technical, mental, blah, 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 So I have it very well organized. And as I was putting that paper that I worked on with him into my forum folders, I just realized, and this, to back up a little bit, this was after I had did the first podcast I did with Arik Levy from Firearms Nation.
Mm-hmm.
And I had been spooling up mentally about doing a blog, but I just never did it. I'm just enjoying not doing anything, mostly throughout the day after I went into semi-retirement mode. So as I was putting that topic into the proper folder, I just saw this massive amount of information that I have organized into categories, and just it's ridiculous how much stuff I have. And then in doing the blog, I realized I have all this specialized knowledge from so many years of experience that it isn't going anywhere. It's just in my head and in my computer, And so then that was the inspiration for the blog. I was like, yeah, I have all the information right here. I have all the starting points right here. And then, now that I'm not competing and haven't been for a while, the most fun writing for me will not be like, the blog has two categories. It has like a shooting category, and then it has like a living category. Like I said, put it some way to somebody, it's like how I learned to live by what I learned from competing. So I took those lessons that I learned. It's not totally true, but it's more fun to say it that way. I took those lessons that I learned from competing and kind of merged them with the lessons that I was learning from studying Zen, basically, meditating, and kind of combine them into just living. Just living.
I lost you again, Brian.
And so then I just put what I learned from shooting into how to live, to live happily and not worry, basically, just enjoy life. So I thought I have two different topics for the blog, and just get that information out there, and people maybe will enjoy it.
Yeah, there's a lot of correlation, and it's weird. People don't tend to do dumb stuff in their lives quite as much as they do dumb stuff in shooting. But it seems like there's a lot of shooters who will make the same mistakes over and over and over again when it's really not necessary.
Yeah.
I've made some hilariously bad life choices, but only once. Try not to repeat those.
Yeah.
All right, and where can people find your blog? Where's the easiest way for them to find it?
Just go right to my homepage, brianenos.com, and there's up the very top of the navigation bar there's a link for blog.
Outstanding. All right, you ready for ready for listener questions?
Yeah.
All right, here we go. Darren wants to know, when he looks back, I'll rephrase it for you, otherwise it'll sound weird. When you look back on your shooting career and all of the influence you've had on the sport, what would you like to be remembered for?
Helping people learn how to pay attention.
Okay, outstanding. This one, I think as a joke, we'll try it anyway. What type of mushrooms do you recommend for Zen mode shooting?
I recommend the ones that have a lot of attention in them.
All right, attention mushrooms. You remember a couple years ago when the guy stole my books off your porch?
Yes.
Bill Dolan wants to know, is the guy that stole the books off your porch still tied to a radiator in your basement?
I wish he was. I wish I had a basement, actually.
No kidding.
It would be.
All right, so this next one's a little bit more serious. All right, Chris would like you to summarize your book. This is the book he was told not to buy until he shot for a while. After I shot for a while, it added a lot of value. You quoted it, become interested in your shooting. Straightforward yet deep. So go ahead and summarize Practical Shooting Beyond Fundamentals.
I wouldn't give the advice to wait until you've shot for a while. You just get get it, start working through it, and you take what works from you, and then keep going back through it. And as you gain more experience, more of the stuff in the book will become clear to you, and you can just keep repeating that process. So there's no reason to wait and start out uh, making a bunch of errors that you could have avoided if you just picked up a few things from the book on the first read.
That's a good point. Good point. Yeah, I actually, the last nationals I went to, I actually took it with me, and it's super abused, dog-eared,
Nice.
and the spine's
I
all
love
broken,
those.
and
Yeah.
the cover's all busted up. And I'm reading it on the plane, and what I really enjoyed was the simplicity of knowing what I needed to do.
Okay.
And I can't quite tell you which section brought me that, but what it really instilled in me was, you're flying on the plane to nationals. If you see what you need to see, everything will be okay.
There you go. Yeah.
And that's, that particular year, I was going through another divorce, my second divorce, lost a job, had a bunch of other problems, and I wasn't practicing very much, but I'd committed to going to the nationals, and I was going to go,
Okay.
and I needed to go just to salvage my own self-worth at that time. You know what I mean?
Okay. Right. You had to do something.
Yeah.
Something good.
And I just remember reading through that book just really made it simple for me. So I want to thank you for that.
Nice. Okay.
All
I
right.
appreciate that. Thank you.
Same guy says, really interested in your journey from some guy trying to compete to somebody who changed the sport.
Hmm.
You probably didn't even know that was happening, did you?
Did not know that was happening.
Yeah.
Definitely not. Yeah.
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 Well, that's how that happens,
You just stay so focused on what you're doing that you don't care about anything else, and then maybe something good will happen.
Right? One of the things when you read that book called The Talent Code, he uses a term called rage to master. And I didn't want to interrupt you when you were talking, but what you said about when you get involved in something you don't care about anything else,
Yeah.
that is the rage to master. And so they've now come up with a term for that where
Okay.
it's just like you never putting the gun down, just like Robbie never putting the gun down.
Yeah.
Just like me dry firing the same drills for 4 hours a night when I got my first open gun. That's the rage to master. And I don't think you can give
Word
that.
in that phrase.
Pardon? Pardon?
Cut out. What was the first word in that phrase?
Oh,
It said something. I didn't understand the word, and then the to master.
rage to master.
Rage, like RAGE.
Yep, that's the rage to
Okay.
master. Where,
Oh, the rage to master. Got it. Okay.
yep, the rage to master. And
Okay.
you described it to a T. And his follow-up question is, what competitions were like when you started? When dirt was new.
I don't quite understand what he's asking. What were competitions like?
Oh, I think he's joking, but
But there were new. Okay.
did
Well, that
you?
was my first thought on that was when it was at the best, because we were shooting these matches into Phoenix at the local armory, and it was heads up. There were no classes.
Yep.
You shot to beat everybody. There was no gun classes. Every gun shot against every gun, and every person shot against every one. And so if you're aiming to come out on top of that mess, you had your work cut out for you.
Yeah. Do you think? Personally, I feel like with all the classes and all the divisions, it's starting to get a little watered down.
Massively.
We're not too far away from participation trophies,
Yes, exactly.
And me personally, I feel like, being, I don't know, coming in second C class at nationals, I don't think that's a very good long-term goal. I think we should set it a little bit higher than that.
Yeah, that's again a tremendously personal thing. My personality is I'm going to win, I'm going to beat you, and then I would forget. Then that went away, and then I would become so self-absorbed in perfecting what I was doing that I might end up beating you.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. I think I have a couple more questions. Oh, I do have. Hang on. I got 3 more questions. We talked about Recoil Springs. All right. Training through the off season versus taking a break. What are your thoughts?
I would take a little break. When I was shooting professionally and sponsored and not having to work and living out in basically the county land out in Apache Junction, have a little bit of property around me, and I felt it was nice to take a break, and then you just feel you're really itching to get back after it again. A lot of things that you're really trying to be perfect at are like that. You got to give yourself some time off now and then.
Okay, outstanding. And then the one that I was a little bit worried about asking you, but you said it was okay. Do you miss shooting, and do you regret walking away?
Nope, I don't regret anything. If I miss it, I'd be doing it.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I could give you a few reasons of why I left, but that's the answer to the question. Yeah.
Okay. Well, we can talk about that if you want to.
Just briefly, I'll
Okay.
hit it briefly. Like it was toward the end, after I've been doing it for about 20 years, the sport had been evolving in a way that I didn't care about for so long with the optics and compensators. I didn't care about any of that crap. I just liked shooting a stock gun. I was going to quit before I did, and then USPSA came out with a limited division. I think it was around 1990 or so. And then I was able to get a sponsorship from a company who wanted somebody to campaign one of their limited guns. It was European American Army at the time. And
Sure.
so that just totally rekindled my interest to be back shooting the stock gun, not having to be shooting optics and compensators and all that crap.
I gotcha.
And then so I got back into that and bounced around with a couple more sponsors for another decade. And at that point, the sponsorship, I was able to do it full time long enough that was just like, I never imagined that could be my life. Like I'd never, graduate. I barely graduated high school. Never had an education. Worked as a mechanic. Worked on a farm. I figured I would never have two nickels to rub together my whole life. But getting as good as I got, I was able to make a decent living. I was winning money that I'd never dreamed of having that much money, ever. And then as that all deteriorated, as the industry started going downhill, in firearm industry in general, in the mid to late in the 90s, sponsorships went down. You could just barely eke out. I designed my life around eking out a living to still be able to live on $20,000 a year. I owned everything I lived on. I had no payments. I didn't even have garbage pickup. It was like, and I loved it. And then that even started dwindling to where it was just like, I got to the point where, you know what I've done? I've got to, I've wretched enough out to be done. And I was happy that I didn't have the need to continue forever. And I just quit. I'm just like, I'm done. I just totally realized one day I'm just totally done with this. And I had no idea what I would do, but I did have enough money saved up to live for about a year without having to work on this property where I lived. I had no payments, no bills, other than a little electric bill every month and a little bit of water. And that's when the website whole thing got inspired.
Okay.
And so then that all worked out too for another 20 years.
Wow, that's a phenomenal story. I personally haven't been competing for several years, and people ask me all the time, "Do you miss it? When are you going to do it again?"
Yeah.
My personality is such that I am getting more gratification helping people get to the next level, whatever that next level is.
Yeah.
Helping them get to that is so much more gratifying for me because it doesn't do a whole lot for me to beat another person in a competition.
Okay, I'm with you. Yeah.
What does a lot for me is to help somebody to whom that is important achieve that goal or whatever that goal is, and most importantly, save them years and years and years of struggle. That's my primary goal.
That's the best stuff right there.
Yeah.
You said that, yeah.
So wonderful. Well, Brian, thank you so much for your time. We got you out of here a half hour early so you can continue your day in sunny Arizona.
Right. Excellent. It is a beautiful day out.
I bet it was almost 50 here in Ohio. We're out in Newark now. Where were you from in Ohio?
I was from so close to, how about New Carlisle? You know where that is?
I don't.
Dayton.
Yep, Dayton.
Okay, so Dayton was about 20 minutes from New Carlisle, and I was probably about 5-10 minutes from there in a little town called Park Lane. Like I said at the beginning of one of my at the bio, it's a good place to be from. I left. I went back there and visited the only remaining person that I know that's still alive there. I never really kept in touch with anyone. Years and years and years went by, decades, and I finally got back in touch with my old running buddy. We used to hunt and trap and fish and catch snakes and just spend all of our time in the woods together. And so I went back and visited him fairly recently. and the place was just like I left it. It was actually worse, but it's just depressing.
All
Very,
right.
very depressing place.
I have one more question for you.
Okay.
I have a friend who was practicing one day in Circleville, Ohio, on a shooting range, and he was having trouble with his draw from hands above shoulders.
Okay.
Okay. He says this mysterious person showed up on the range and said, "Do these things quickly and do this thing slowly." And
Right.
he thinks it might have been you. Was that you? Circleville, Ohio.
Circleville. So there was the one professional range that we used to go to was called Miami Valley Shooting Grounds.
Ooh, that might it might have been him because he's from
I think
Dayton.
that might have been it. That might have been Circleville. That name sounds familiar. So if it would have been before 1978, summer of 1978, it could have been because that was the only range we ever went. That's the only place we ever paid to shoot at.
Hmm.
Everywhere else would be just out in the woods.
Well, I will find. I don't think he's been doing it quite that long. I don't think he's quite that old, but I'll find him
Yeah.
and let him know.
Okay. Yeah, if it was after 78, it wasn't me.
Okay. Well, that might be true for a lot of things, huh, Brian?
That's true.
Well, thanks again for your time, sir. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
You're welcome, Steve. I enjoyed it very much. Thank you.
All right. Have a great day, Brian.
All right.
Bye.
Thanks.